Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome.
We're back.
We're back. It keeps happening every week.
I don't know
It's
how.
relentless.
When will it stop?
We just show up here all of a sudden and do
Uh,
stuff.
yep. Welcome to the Tech Audio Chat. I am Dan Reynolds. Work in game audio, and I'm joined by Eric Buchholz and David Weaver. That's how we decided. If you remember, that's
You're
how we
supposed to
decided.
mess my name
Actually,
up.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because people don't normally get the German pronunciation correct, but that's actually it.
Oh, I was thinking Bavarian, but okay.
Well, times have changed.
Times have changed. That's
It's
true.
a different world.
The usual YouTube and/or social media platform of your selection stuff. Liking, I don't really care what you do, but if you like the video, it is feedback to me, presumably, that this was relevant to you. If you subscribe to the channel, if you haven't already, or the thing, whatever it is, then that's letting us know that you want to see more of this, as if we cared. And if you put that little bell thingy, then you'll get pestered by us whenever I put a video up. Actually, it's just me. Actually, whenever I feel like putting a video up, it'll annoy you. If this sounds like your cup of tea, then do whatever you want.
I should probably hit the bell too. I sometimes
Are
almost
you not
forget
subscribed?
No, I'm
What?
subscribed. I don't hit the bell though. The bell is just a step too far. It's like too much commitment, you know.
It's
I don't need
speaking
to know
of
every time.
speaking of tea. Whenever I am thirsty, I like to get loose leaf tea from the Perennial Tea Room. This is not an endorsement by the Perennial Tea Room.
This is a Norton. What's that?
this is
NordVPN
not
sponsorship?
this is not a paid endorsement. They don't even know I'm doing this. This is just where I get my tea, and also it's where Eric gets his tea. So
I'm sipping.
I mean, if they knew,
Paris
they'd probably
tonight.
shut you down, right?
they would
Like,
probably shut me down.
No chance.
That's true. I am not opposed to discounts on tea. I spend way too much money on tea. That is not a comment on their pricing. I'm sorry. That's let me walk that back a little bit.
What's the tea of choice this morning?
I like I like Assam. That's sort of my go-to.
Okay.
I tend to go for the more traditional black teas. That's sort of what I prefer.
Yeah, same.
I don't really get into like the too much of the flavored blends and stuff like that. Earl Grey is kind of the most exotic. Maybe a chai.
Okay.
But I really do like an Assam.
I've got some Paris blend tonight. But,
I forget that one. Is that one has vanilla in it or something?
Yeah, I think so. It might vary. I'm not sure. I just buy all the flavors and shake it up every. I like variety.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that. How about you, David? What's your tea of choice?
I like a chai, but recently I tried a very exotic thing called apple crumble, which was like,
get the fuck out of here.
It had some crazy stuff going on, but it was really nice. I actually really liked it. But generally, I'm more of an herbal tea thing because I do coffees until sort of 1, and then I do herbal tea for the rest of the day. So,
how long? So here's a question for you, because I try to moderate my caffeine intake as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wait typically an hour and a half after waking up before I have any tea. And I usually stop around 3 p.m. Sometimes I'll go to like 4, but usually that's sort of my afternoon is my sort of cutoff point.
I try no caffeine after about 1-ish. But it depends when I wake up or what I'm doing. Sometimes, I mean, I used to work US time. I'm not doing it right now, but when I work US time, it's hard when people tell me that you shouldn't have caffeine for the first hour of your day, and I'm like, yeah, but it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so I think I'm gonna have a coffee, But I don't know. I feel like whatever works for you is once you get to the point where you're shaking because you've had so much caffeine, maybe that's probably one too many. But otherwise, like I wasn't really a heavy tea person. I was very much just coffee until I drop, and then working from home, I found the routine of making a tea and slowing down and taking the time out to let it steep and having a big pot next to you is really really nice.
Nice. Eric, when do you start your tea?
Y'all are making me feel like a caffeine junkie over here
Yeah,
because
it's
I
like right
usually
out right out of bed.
pretty much, yeah. I mean, I like to sip on something hot in the morning, as
Yep.
I'm
Yeah,
uh, getting latest and just kind of syncing up on everything that's coming in. But no, I'm drinking caffeine right now, and
yeah,
for me, caffeine doesn't really do much for me. It's not like I do drink decaf as a way to like try and not have those nights where you just can't fall asleep. So I would say my cutoff is like 8 p.m. is when I stop drinking caffeine, but that's more like I go to bed around midnight, I guess. So it's
yeah.
not, yeah, I feel like it's
That's
enough
not crazy.
time.
I mean, I like an espresso after dinner as well. Sometimes that's a big thing for me. So, I mean, while I have a caffeine cutoff, I'm also having an espresso at 8:30 or something. So,
The mornings there. It's not always the case in the summer, but here in the sort of Pacific Northwest, where both Eric and I feel like the mornings have that sort of cool, wet, very dewy because it's the moisture in the air is pretty decent. It's coastal and all that, and definitely a warm cup of tea is very satisfying. Like this sort of hot beverage in the morning, a sort of nice contrast. All
All
right,
right.
Steven's in the chat. Hey everyone. Steven was really engaged in our tea stories.
Post what you're drinking in the chat.
I've got a Boylan's root beer. I don't actually drink alcohol. I call myself a teetotaler.
oh no, oh dear.
All right,
Yeah.
let's get a move on here. We've got a
Yep.
lot of
All
covered.
right. So yeah, Eric, you, what are we doing tonight?
So I think we wanted to talk about performance and kind of doing some resource profiling, looking at some capturing trace data and then analyzing it and seeing where we can find room for improvements, whether it's CPU. Probably not going to look at memory tonight. I think it's a lot easier to
Okay.
focus on CPU. Yeah. Do we want
Why
to
do we
just
care? What is this? Why do we care?
Well, I think it's mainly something that so on one hand, it's like premature optimization is like something, we're all familiar with that. Like you don't want to optimize away like the cool stuff that you put in your projects, but I want to talk about things that if you're working on a project that you plan to ship on like a mobile platform or just something very low spec, maybe VR, or you don't have a lot of room for like beefy meta sounds, and so we're going to look at ways to make more optimized meta sounds besides just using meta sound pages. There's quite a few techniques that are pretty useful for trying to come in under the bar.
Sure.
So again, like these are things that I would mostly encourage people to do if they're kind of in that last final stages of optimization and just need to find kind of some easy wins. Um, but yeah,
So you've decided to pick on me,
a
and
little bit,
it's
yeah. So it just so happens that Lyra. Um,
Just full of problems. Just chock full of problems.
yeah. So for people at home who don't realize this, is that I was kind of like the tech audio lead on Project Lyra, and I worked with some cool cats from Sweet Justice, Gustav Rathman in particular.
Please.
Yeah, Sweet Justice is pretty rad. They're a really great team to work with. And also Rich Vreeland, otherwise known as Disaster Peace. And so and I will say this about Lyra is we kind of wanted everyone to go ham on meta sounds. So I was like, Gustav, he worked on Battlefield, I think, previously, and so I was like, you're the gun expert. Go to town. And if you look at those meta sounds, they're pretty crazy. And then actually with Rich, we were like, this was not just me, by the way. This is Aaron. So I will say Aaron is a little bit at fault here, although he denies it because he didn't remember it. So I remember it. It's locked down. So I do blame him a little bit here. And that was the direction for Rich was to put all the music in one meta sound, and also because of licensing reasons, he couldn't just use any old samples, right? He had to use samples that we could provide. We had no musical samples to offer him. We had some buyout on some like sound effects libraries. And so what he created was very interesting as a result. We also wanted to sort of like be future facing, and we gave him a bunch of noise music references. So you know how it is. So yeah, I will just say that in my own defense. And
I'm not trying to call anyone out or nothing. Like this project was one of the first to ship with meta sounds, right? So it's I'm sure a lot of these considerations weren't even really at the forefront.
Shipped the early access project. Valley of the Ancient was the first project to use meta sounds, and then The Matrix Awakens was the second project to use meta sounds, which we then shipped on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, X, and XSS.
It's a pretty
just
powerful.
Nearest Xbox X. Yeah, and so they were next gen at that.
You weren't trying to ship Lyra on iPhone 11 or something.
No, and we did have some. There was some fallout later. After Lyra shipped, some people complained. They were like, "Hey, this doesn't really perform very well on Switch," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, well, okay."
But I mean, I suppose like to reframe the setting a little bit. Performance is one of those things where I feel like you could open basically any project in the world and be able to pick out things and be like, hey, I want to look at it. Like the number of projects I get on where you hit play, it runs at FPS, and you think like, okay, cool, we're good to go. But then you open the profiler, you start poking around insights, and you go like, oh, that could be cheaper, and oh, that could be better. And the way I like to view optimization isn't necessarily just fixing problems. Fixing problems is like the road that you've got to go down. But then there's also ones where like, if I can carve out more space, I can do cooler shit somewhere else. I can use those resources to do cooler shit somewhere else. So I do feel like regardless of how well a project ships or receives, with new advancements, and especially like given how much Epic seem to be pouring into insights and really making the profiling side of Unreal a lot better for audio, but for everything. I do feel like there's renewed vigor in looking at your own projects or looking at things that you've already shipped and trying to make changes, non-destructive changes that fix workflow. That it really isn't about how well a project shipped or didn't ship or whatever. Because I mean, there's everything ever you could open up and be like, oh, this sucks.
That was a very nice way of saying, Dan, accept and acknowledge that this is okay for Eric to do this.
Yep.
All right.
Present.
Yeah.
Right.
I would. Yeah, we can try this. I don't have a lot of control over the windows right now, but we can try this. I can do this if that is okay. People can share
So
us.
I actually want to. I'm going to reshare my screen so I can share sound. What I want to do first is kind of play Lyra for a bit. Walk around, get all the sounds to trigger, and shoot some enemies and stuff. I want to record a utrace file that we're going to open up in Insights afterward.
Okay.
And so for a little bit, it's probably going to have like an echo feedback if either of you try and talk while I share my audio. But we're just going to play a little
All
bit
right.
of Lyra.
Let me hold on. I think that the order here is the first video. I don't think I can adjust the So here's what I'm going to do, because I like this view for what we're about to get into. Let me reorder the windows. So you reshare your thing,
Okay.
and then that'll be the first video that I add to the thing, and I'm going to just re-add us basically, so we can have
Okay.
this fancy view.
So I am going to share my audio now.
And then everyone bear with me just a second while we get there we go.
All right, let me enter some cheats first. Is there like a God mode? There we go. We got audio insights up on the right. And let's see. Let's turn on 3D visualize. So AU 3D visualize enabled 1 will now put like a debug sphere wherever I've got sounds. And I like that because it's nice to see where are all of my audio components currently at. So much for God mode. Probably gonna die quite a bit, but that's fine. All right, let's grab some guns. My PC's struggling a little bit. It's showing its age, but so now I'm going to start looking at kind of responding a lot of audio components for like impacts. Is there like a shotgun hanging around somewhere? I also see our footsteps are attached to our player pawn. And which is fine, but like it is an optimization thing that if you just play a sound at location, it won't spawn an audio component. It's a little bit cheaper. Also, let me find it's a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to. Okay, so Insights is recording a trace. Hopefully I can open this one afterward. I want to look at my fire settings. And I see that we're spawning, looks like there's a concurrency settings. There's about 3 or lots of shotgun fires in there. And there's some room there that we could maybe reuse the same meta sound for like one weapon shooting multiple, like re-triggering a weapon fire sound in the same meta sound. I think we're probably have enough data here. All right, let me stop sharing my audio now.
It's funny, really. A lot of those, a lot of the things that you were calling out are a lot of the same things that you see when you just open a project and turn on that 3D visualize. You know, lots of audio components spawning, or not using play sound at location, or doing the attachments, and you know, some of those things look right, which is why it's so tricky. Like the attaching to the skeleton, you're like, oh, that kind of looks right. And you're like, well, it's a component that now has to like move every frame, and it didn't really need to because the sound doesn't actually go there. And yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, scene component updates really add up on like as far as just overall Unreal. I don't even know how you'd reference that, or what you'd call that. When you have a lot of moving scene components, it just adds up to be quite a lot. Okay, so now we have a trace file that down on the bottom right here, there's like a trace menu, and this little is probably super hard. Let me try zooming in on my here. Is that better?
Yeah,
What
so
is
better.
that menu?
That's the widget reflector.
So this is the widget reflector, and the keyboard shortcut is Control Shift W, and you can scale your entire window. It's very
It's a
handy
debug for Slate.
yes, and the whole editor happens to use Slate, and so we get to benefit from that. Okay, so hopefully you can now see these icons a little better down here. This circle with like the graph in the middle, that's how you start recording a trace. If you have Audio Insights open, it will automatically start recording a trace for you. So I didn't have to do that manually. But in this trace menu here, there's an Unreal Insights session browser, which pops open this window and it'll list all of the traces that you've recorded. The one on the bottom here is the one that I just recorded. So I'm going to open that up and put it up here. And it's going to take probably not too long to load because it was fairly short trace. But right now it's loading a timeline of all of the events that happened on, not all the events, but all of like the with instrumented events that are being recorded when I start a trace. And we'll be able to comb through this and sift through and find all the like the meta sound stuff is mainly what we're going to be looking at.
But these are metrics from the code base where programmers have opted in to measure, say, a function or whatever.
For instance, let me just clear out some of the tracks here. Like I can hide all of the GPU. We're not really concerned about anything going on there. And so the top is always going to be the game thread, or usually the game thread. And that's where most of like our your blueprints are going to be running here. For instance, if I just zoom all the way in, we can see individual frames. And if I right click on it, I can select time range of event. And now this blue window of time represents one frame. And then on the right side, it should be, I don't know why it didn't show all of the events that happened in here, but it would tally it up and give you a list of like what were the most which events took up the most time on the CPU to finish. So if I don't know, hopefully that's gonna work now. Let me select everything. So it's computing the aggregated stats. Let's just zoom in on one of these and see what's going on. So we've got like somebody called shoot. So then there's like a gameplay event being sent. We got start ranged weapon targeting, on burst, on fire. So there's probably some audio in here because we're firing a weapon. Zooming in a little bit more, we can see we spawned a Niagara system for a shell. More Niagara stuff. This is spawning particles. All right, so we got set weapon sound params. We're getting closer. And actually I passed it. It's, actually, no, I thought I saw sound there. Here's a gameplay cue that's being executed when someone took damage. And okay, so I tried hunting it down. It's pretty hard, but you can see that there's a lot of stuff happening on a frame. But what we can do instead is we can search for events on the side here. And there's two main ones that I always look for when working with meta sounds. The first one being meta sound do work. And oh, now we've got times. Cool, that actually worked. It's weird that everything was zeros before. But now I've got a list of all of the rectangles on here that have metasound or async metasound builder do work. And so what this event does, or what happens here, is this is the building of the metasound itself when you play it. And so if I look at the count column, I've got a bunch of numbers that represent the number of times that metasound was built or like compiled or played at runtime.
That's during your selection, whatever your selection period is, right?
Yep, and I selected the whole thing.
Right.
If I wanted to, I could filter out a portion of it. And so I can see we played Footstep Concrete 1,357 times. We have 402 impacts, lots of whiz-bys. So it's pretty cool to kind of see which of your sounds are playing the most often. This might be a good way of deciding which meta sounds you want to add to the operator cache, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But it, another thing you can do when you're looking at the do work event is if you right click on this top bar, you can go to view column, and then you can get the average and median, as well as the min and max inclusive times. Exclusive time, I don't really look at that so much. It's more, it's like the scope of the events, and like how much, how it's how you want to look at the event, of like inside nested the event, or like the parts of the event that are outside of that, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, because I guess exclusive time is the time that the function itself took to run, and inclusive time is the function itself plus anything it called took to
Yeah.
run.
So like just looking at this green one, the gaps in between these like child events, I guess you could say, that would be where the inclusive time is added up, and then the whole thing is inclusive, and then the exclusive time is the time in between. Is that right? I don't know. I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
looked at
And
exclusive
then
time in a while.
no, I
Makes sense.
mean, exclusive time's only really helpful if you throw a bunch of traces at a whole bunch of functions and try and work out like which one is bloating the time. But it's
Yeah.
definitely a more granular thing. I mean, it's also probably worth saying that we're doing this trace in editor, which probably, we're doing that out of convenience instead of a build where this might look a little bit different.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot more optimizations that happen in a client, a cooked build. So now let's try and find one of these events on our chart here. So if I want to actually find the pistol fire, and I'm going to right click on it, and I can highlight the event, and it's not going to be on the game thread. It's going to be down here on one of the background threads, or multiple of the background threads. So each time we have one of these kind of rectangles, that was where we played our meta sound, our pistol fire sound. And I'm going to unhighlight it now that I found one. You can also, there's find instance, and so you can look for the maximum duration instance or the minimum duration instance, which could be useful as well. And so I chose
That's
that,
cool.
and now it's found the one that took 5.5 milliseconds, which is kind of a long time, especially. Well, it is the longest one, so it's good to look at the average, in my opinion, because or the median, because it gives you more of like a normal, typical value for the time. So now we found it. We can kind of drill down in here and see what's happening when we're playing a meta sound. And
Just wait, before you go into that, I think it's worth mentioning, if it wasn't obvious, it's on a separate thread. That's one of the big things about, that's like an important caveat with meta sounds. Meta sounds, as say opposed to sound cue, the meta sound entire is rendered in a separate. It's basically asynchronous from the game thread.
yes,
Whereas sound cues, their graphs are actually evaluated on a parallel locked in step thread to the game thread called the audio thread, or just audio. Sometimes we call it the audio logic thread, which is where sound candidates are determined. So, in other words, this render that we're looking at is not contributing to time on the game thread.
correct.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got this really big event, and keep in mind this was the biggest event of weapons pistol fire, and we can see that we're doing a lot of stuff in build graph operator. Then we've got create operators, and then I've got a bunch more build graph operators, and so that's interesting. And I think we'll look at this meta sound and see if we can figure out why it's got so many things, kind of why it's so deep in the kind of the icicle chart here, I think this is referred to as.
Yeah.
But next I want to look at another function that, or event, it's called onGenerateAudio. And this refers to the block rate render cost. And so for instance, I'm guessing the highest one here, if I sort by average, is going to be the mute. Yeah, it's always music because it's ever present and it's usually has the most stuff going on. I do apologize. It was probably pretty hard to see. I don't think I can zoom in on this one the same way that I did on the editor. But I'll just read the numbers. So on my PC, and it's good to kind of remind everyone that the numbers that you see as far as like the CPU times, these are showing milliseconds, and this is specific to my PC. If that's not obvious, like if Dan or David were to record a trace on their PCs, it would be possibly very different depending on the specifications. But also, your mobile platforms are going to have a lot higher numbers just because there's less CPU processing available. So just something to keep in mind. But on my PC, the music system is on average 0.4 milliseconds per block, which is double the time that it takes for one of our rifle or our shotgun to fire. So it's beefy, but wouldn't say it's too crazy. The inclusive time is going to be the total sum of all of the time that it took, that the CPU spent rendering this meta sound, right? So if I added up the time it took to render every block that we heard of this sound, it would be 6.7 seconds. And the colors of, like, you see, like some of them are red, yellow, green. It's a bit misleading. It's not really worth looking at that, in my opinion. It's just kind of sorting everything by inclusive time, and it just means that we heard the music system more than everything else. It could mean that you could have like a really simple meta sound, like our footstep is way up here. It has 4.7 seconds, but the average time was only 0.05 milliseconds. So it's always good to be looking at multiple columns to kind of make an assessment of like overall what you would expect to see here. Because I think we can agree that our footstep sounds probably aren't that expensive. It's 8 times less expensive than the music, but it plays like 67% as much as the music.
Yeah, so that's definitely a metric that I'm usually looking at, and I was keen to see how you'd approach it because I feel like you're looking for something that has a low count and a high inclusive cost realistically, right? You're looking for something that you didn't call to play much, but took a long time when you did play it, as opposed to something that played all the time and there's 10,000 counts of it and it seems like it's expensive, but it's really just because it was playing all the time, like you find in ambiances or quads or beds or something that might be playing persistently like music is, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can also, so the footsteps, another thing to look at here is that the count is much higher because there's obviously multiple players running around and they're all creating the same footsteps. And so even I guess that the way the math works out, higher count but lower average inclusive time just means that you have a really high overall inclusive time. And so that's why it's not good to just sort by inclusive time and look at the colors to determine like, oh, it's red, that means the footsteps are bad. Just yeah, you got to kind of make the calculations, I guess, or just kind of come to your own conclusions about it. But so that's all I want to look at in insights for now. Let's actually just dive in on some of the things that we called out during the playthrough. I did take some notes here, and I wanted to kind of start with some of the simpler things that aren't meta sound specific, but more like just kind of good general practice. And I think the first thing that stood out to me would be like those impact sounds, how they'd we had a lot of impacts there, and I think the main reason we saw like and I can jump back into, we don't need to hear it now, I can still demonstrate, is like if I have a shotgun, and let me find one, each pellet is playing an impact sound when it hits the wall, and I think that's probably why if there is concurrency on it somewhere, that it would be set to something higher than expected. Here we go. and turn on. I already have it on. Yeah, so I'm guessing we have like a concurrency setting of 8 on the shotgun. And so bear with me. I haven't actually spent much time in Lyra, so I don't really know my way around everything. So we've got a preset version, and then I assume this one has what
In a way, it's kind of better that you don't know your way around because, I mean, you're not always going to know every project in and out. It's good to just poke around and try and work out what's standing out to you.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, so we've got a couple of concurrency sets here. We've got limit to owner of 3, and that's good. And then we've got guns stop farthest. And so this has 16, but if we look at reference view, one sec, we can see all of the sounds that are sharing this sound concurrency set or rule. And so all of our weapons that fire are being the maximum is 16, which is quite a lot. But you can only have 3 gun sounds coming from yourself, which is also probably kind of a lot. Just want to check some attenuation. So 15,000. When you're trying to reduce the number of sounds playing, concurrency and attenuation can be some of the lowest hanging fruit. It's a lot more performant to render fewer sounds than it is to go through and start stripping away things from your assets. Okay, so let's see. We've got a bunch of different layers here. I'm looking at, this is the shotgun. So we've got a gut punch layer, which has a wave player. We've got another wave player here for the gun mech. Third wave player. I'm counting the wave players, 4 and 5 for the sweetener. And so the reason I'm counting the wave players is because wave players are actually the most expensive thing that we do in meta sounds. And so the more you have, the more expensive it's going to be, obviously.
This is a good time to point out the relative render cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
So up on the top left here, I keep trying to highlight it, is the relative render cost. And if I hit play, you can see that it started at maximum 4, and then it went down to 1, and then it stopped. And so what relative render cost currently is it's a count of the number of active wave players. And so when you first play it, we get all of our layers. That time it had 5, and then it quickly went down to 2 and then 1. One thing to note is that it's the minimum relative render cost is 1. So if you have a meta sound that's running, even though it's not playing any wave players, it's still going to have a render cost of 1. And then if you have 1 wave player, it will also be 1. 2 will then go up to 2.
Yeah, the right now it's just sort of like a meta metric for wave players. The sort of the concept behind it is to sort of provide a useful metric of scale where CPU is kind of vague. Like, what does 3% of my CPU mean? I don't know, and it's different on every computer, right? But if you can say, well, this costs about as much as a sound playing, that's kind of what relative render cost is getting at. It's like, oh, this is like playing 5 sounds at once. We're just playing 1 meta sound, but maybe we're playing 5 sounds at once. That's the cost of it. And so that's the idea behind relative render cost. What we're hoping to do is extend that evaluation to other nodes that generate audio. Decoding audio is still one of the more expensive propositions. Obviously, that's somewhat dependent on your codec, but yeah. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Just sort of that's like a little side there.
So I found our impacts using a concurrency of 8. Which is, given that it's shared among all the weapons, and for Lyra, y'all probably didn't want to like make new settings for everything. 8's probably a bit higher than I would go. I would tend to be a bit more aggressive with that. So the next thing I wanted to look at I noticed that the weapon pads, or like the pickup ambient loop, it looked like this was getting stuck playing for a bit. And now I'm actually not sure I'm in the right one. What does this one sound like? Okay, so I can't actually hear this right now. Interesting. Yeah, I know y'all can't hear what my audio is doing now, but I didn't hear anything when I played that either. Okay. Let me try a different one. Weapon pad.
By the way, this is the first time I've looked at the project since probably I shipped it. So
Yeah, no worries. Curious. I also before the stream, I was having trouble, or I guess previous streams past, I was having trouble getting Lyra 5.6, and I was having issues with Fab, and I was able to get 5.6 today. I figured out the issue, but I had previously been brushing up a little bit on. I did one playthrough on Lyra 5.3 just to test it out for tonight's stream. And so I was looking at this one, and it actually looks like it was re-implemented between 5.6 and 5.3. So maybe or maybe not. I could be in the wrong sound as well.
It's possible that could happen. I didn't do it, but if say for example, something we did like was discontinued or deprecated, some sort of thing, node or I don't know, then that could have been updated. We sort of depend on it being used in tests, so we hope that issues will float up, but it's always possible something gets missed.
All right, I think we found our first deep dive.
Oh yeah.
When I say deep dive, I'm curious to see how deep we're diving here. So if we look at this graph, it looks pretty beefy. We've got a lot of different layers. This is doing like a wave player crossfader is what that says. We've got a gated wave player, low ammo tone. So this has probably got like a sine or something, a triangle. Oops, I'm closing too many. Let's just keep organized here. We got more wave players. So there's like, I want to say that's like 5 layers. And then we're doing some filtering. We've got random EQ, stereo gain. And so this would be a good time to talk about Metasound pages, I think, which wasn't a thing back when Lyra was first created. I actually wonder if let's see.
Pages were first released in version 5.5.
Okay, so let me try adding pages. I hope I don't have to restart here, but if I go into, is it in audio or Metasound? I think it's in Metasound. Yeah. Here we go, page settings. So I'm going to make a new page settings in my project settings here. And let's just call it mobile. Because let's say we're going to be shipping on Android. Let's just choose mobile here. And so now I've got the default page settings. And by default, we're going to target everything, I think. Actually, no. For mobile, I want to not target default. And then my mobile settings down here, we're going to target mobile. I think I've set this up right. This is kind of the thing that you only ever do once and then you never look at it again.
Well, also, and this is feedback that I gave to the person who wrote the feature, is the tooltips were very confusing to me. I think I read them like 10 times.
Yeah, I remember having some similar questions about that. But, you set it up, and now if I go to my window here, I probably have to restart, don't I? I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. I'm not going to save anything.
So it sort of goes to say that pages are a way to change the graph or do something to get more performance out on specific platforms. Is that the point of pages?
It's basically an alternate graph. All right. So one of the things that people may have noticed is can be a frustrating constraint that currently is the case. It may not always be the case, but currently is the case. When you design a meta sound, you can't alter the graph. The graph is not dynamic, right? So it's fixed basically. That's where you're like, oh, I want two of these instead of one. And it's like, you can't just go plus, or something like that. It's just like, I have to add a whole other thing to it. And so uh, one of the things that was a normal design pattern in sound cues, as an example, is we used to have a quality switch node. And the quality switch node was in this case tied to platform and allowed you to say, well, okay, I want to use this sound cue crazy graph for desktop and console, but then on mobile, say I want to have a simplified version of it instead, right? But there were other things so this is interesting story time. I'm gonna get a little bit of story time if that's okay, Eric.
Yeah, go for it.
Fortnite, this may surprise you, was originally a PlayStation 4 exclusive.
Right.
And then when we released it, it was actually for everything. The desktop and Xbox was sort of a late certification. It was something that sort of happened at the end, and then when it became super popular, suddenly it became super relevant to have Fortnite be available on every platform that existed in the world, and so mobile was one of those because when you're making a game these days, and you want it to be everywhere, you absolutely want it to be on people's phones because people have phones wherever they go. They don't necessarily take their computer with them everywhere they go or their Xbox everywhere they go. And so if you want people to be, this is one of the things that you may have noticed in our like current state of entertainment, is that engagement of time is the most important factor. And you want to basically engage people all the time. And that's where, like, I don't know if you ever saw, there was like an article where like a Netflix executive was like, we're competing against Fortnite, like that's like the idea is that you're just sort of competing for people's attention and engagement, right? And that's sort of the top metric. And so that means that you need to be available wherever people are, and mobile becomes a really important part of that. But if you made a game for PlayStation, you did not make the game for mobile.
Yep.
So if you know that you're shipping on a mobile platform up ahead, you build in all these sort of alternate contingencies. But so this is all to say that a lot of automatic optimizations had to be created for the Fortnite mobile release. And there's actually a really great, if you look at the 2008 keynote for GDC, Epic's keynote, 2008 and 2018 and 2019, you'll see a lot of people talking about optimization, like a lot of teams talking about optimization. And I think the 2018 one has a ton of talks around graphics optimization for mobile. Obviously, this is all driven by need. And so for audio, we actually didn't talk in 2018, but we did in 2019 do a talk, and it was mostly about optimization. Some of the stuff that we did is like automatic pruning of like variances and random stuff and that sort of thing. Anything that we could sort of automatically do for the sound designers was a boon, because making the sound designer go back through all the stuff that they created and like redesign everything is kind of a disaster, right? It's not really sustainable, especially at that time, because like Epic was like 10 times smaller, you know? So, uh, so yeah. So anyway, this is to say that there are actually a bunch of approaches to optimizing. One of the ones that was very useful was this sort of quality switch node, and it allowed you to sort of have an alternate graph, sound cue graph, based on the platform, and it would cook out the other
Mm.
graphs. So you'd also get some benefit on like the pack size, like the disk size, and all this sort of other stuff. Um, so yeah, so that was something when we rolled out Meta Sounds, we didn't have anything like that, you know, and we were seeing like, okay, yes, this is a very next gen facing system, and just like any other literally any other feature that Unreal has released that's really cool, starts off being like really cool first, and then optimize later, right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, so that's the idea, and Pages is that approximation. It's a way for designers um, to conceive of an alternate, more optimized graph topology for other platforms. And so by the settings alone, you can sort of see it's focused on platform stuff. But there's more to it than just the alt graph, and I think that Eric might get into that. But yeah, so that's story time with Dan.
Yeah, it's awesome. No, I mean it's definitely it's not a feature that seems obvious at the start, but I mean knowing that there's a part of your pipeline that you might want to use, that kind of thing. I could see you definitely need to pick when to implement this kind of structure, because I guess if you're changing the graph and needing alternates and
Yeah.
stuff, you don't want to necessarily. I don't know when you sign up to it, but maybe we'll see more.
Honestly, it's still in debate. Like we still have conversations
Mm,
about when is the best time to sort of introduce this in the production pipeline. When is the best time to start? Because as we've talked about before, the like it's very easy to sort of quash cool ideas if you're
yeah.
hyper focused on optimization right up front. And so you kind of have to find that balance. And I think it's going to be different for every project, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be different for every project. What the goals are, what the min specs are, all that sort of stuff calls into play. Um, but one of like this came out in 5.5, and it was pushed because if you can remember, the Fortnite and the sort of Fortnite stuff, all the experiences, it's was released in UE4 before Metasounds, right? So it's there's a lot that about its design that was very UE4 oriented, the way that UE4 thinks about conceived audio production, and so Metasounds and UE5, like audio modulation, all this sort of stuff that came later, sort of is trying to push toward a different approach. And there's tension there, right? Because there has to be some cohesion, some synergy, that where the old and the new work together, right?
Mm.
Because you're just not going to replace all of the content. And Fortnite has so much content. People talk about working at scale, like that's a
It's
game
got a,
that's at
got a bit.
scale.
It's got a bit.
So yeah, but one of the things that we pushed for, certainly I did, when I was my small part of it, but the Big Bang, all of those Big Bang experiences were very meta sound design oriented. They were very much sort of trying to embrace this new approach, and so um, optimization was a huge focus. It still remains a focus, but certainly leading up to that, there was a lot of optimization in the Metasounds area. And
You definitely
5.5 came out before the Big Bang, so there's stuff that came before 5.5 and stuff that sort of came after, right after 5.5. That shows up in 5.6. But yeah, sorry, what was you say?
no, sorry. I was just going to jump on something you mentioned there of how difficult it is to optimize something that has a lot of content and a lot of different design decisions, or just a long shelf life. And it hitting Fortnite is good to hear about some of those, because whether you have lots of people or not a lot of people, or big teams or small teams or long projects or not, that tech debt builds up. Sort of
Yeah.
entropy exists no matter what, and even new features that come in can be hard to actually can be hard to use, because you realize, oh, well, if I change this, I've got to go back through 1,500 Metasound instances just to hit it. So it's definitely one of those things where working cleanly and reevaluating your pipeline of how you're approaching things, and working out what would need to change when we want to change a thing, is it's so tricky to walk that tightrope between premature optimization of like, are we squashing the cool ideas and not doing the cool stuff, or are we building up too much tech debt? And I think a place like Epic has a good sort of methodology of having cell teams that work on these features that can have a cool thing, and then a new person that opens up 5-6 just kind of gets all the brand new features, and they can build a game that, they watched a GDC talk and they thought, geez, it'd be so sick to make an immersive sim where you walk around the Matrix demo and whatever, and they can just start building that. And it's like, okay, it's interesting seeing the game industry move away from, you used to pick a release and then that was what you shipped on. You used to ship on, if you picked 427, you were on 427 even when 5 came out. Whereas now I'm seeing much more teams will start in 5.2, and then when 5.3 comes out, they'll shift some engineers over to implementing that, because the changes are now just so mostly very, very impactful, and there's a sort of a lot of quality of life stuff at the same time. But audio being across the quality of life is usually pretty tough for small teams as well. Trying to, you have one tech sound designer, or you have one sound designer and one musician or something like that. It's pretty hard to say we're going to get one person to go back through 800 footstep notifiers and click a checkbox or something. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, and that is so much to unpack from that. I feel like there's a lot to be said about that. And so, like, working backward, first of all, like what you described is like, oh, I have to go revise, thousands of assets. That was actually one of the main reasons for replacing sound cues. Sound cues don't work at scale. Sound cues are kind of awful at really big, large scales. And it's because they don't have an inheritance model. And so here's another story. When I first started at Epic, they had like an early access version of Paragon out, which was like a sort of third person MOBA. And I remember there was some kind of architectural design change they wanted to make. And they had all of these, they had like thousands of sound cues that used a node. I forget exactly what it was, but it was like some sort of switch node that was related to player character or non-player character, like remote, non-player, and player, or something like that. And I think it was derived from a node in the shooter game. If you look at shooter game, it has a custom sound cue node that is supposed to be switched between non-player and player or something like that. And I remember they changed that. They were like, we want this behavior to be not 3, or we want it to be 2 instead of 3. And poor Joey Kuris had to work late, a weekend or 2 or something like that, to change like 1,000 sound cues. Just like they were all identical. They were basically the same graph, but they had thousands of them. And it's just like, what an awful like, that's terrible. That's a terrible user story. And so that was like one of the things that Metasound, like, it was a Metasound pillar. And that's where presets come from, is that idea that we didn't want like an object inheritance, like you have with blueprints. But we wanted something where you could be like, this is the base topology. And Because really, what you look at, if you look at a lot of practical game audio design, most projects, like 80% of the sounds will be like just a handful of the same behaviors
Yeah.
over and over. And so that was like the idea behind presets. And there's lots of finicky parts about working with presets. It's definitely something that continues to need improvement. But yeah, that's sort of a big reason. So I forget the other things you talked about. I was
I
working
like
back.
how Eric's going to be finished optimizing the whole game
That's
soon. It'll
right.
be
No,
running
so
at 300 FPS.
I'm trying to get acclimated to Lyra here, and maybe Dan,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
this
mean,
is how many years ago, but so I'm interested in hooking up a way of re-triggering weapon fire sounds, like firing a trigger into an existing meta sound rather than spawning a new sound every time you want to fire a weapon.
yeah.
I'm having trouble because it uses a GCN right now, a gameplay queue.
This was an argument that I had with the gameplay programmers at the time, because what I wanted was a looping GCN, so that I could have a sustained fire, and instead of using triggers, use like a steady rate repeat or something like that. So what Gustav ended up having to implement to prevent jitter is some sort of like rate control mechanism. That's if you look at the assault rifle.
Oh,
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm just looking through some of these blueprints, and it is somewhat strange to me. But so there's like the base weapon class, right? And we have a GCN that's calling a function on the base weapon class. Very interesting. So this is the GCN for pistol fire, for instance, and we have set weapon sound params here. We've got early reflections and whiz-by stuff is all in this GCN. And so I want to have
this is data that's passed into this function, right? Where does this data come from?
So the GCN is called.
It's just on the GCN, right?
Well, so the gameplay ability is what's going to trigger the gameplay queue, and so we're getting parameters and like the target from the gameplay ability, passing those into some of these. Yeah. So we've in this function library that someone made called weapon audio functions has like send weapon fire, and so we're this is how we're communicating with the music manager, grabbing that from the game state and passing like receiving weapon fire because that adapts the music based on
the music
taking fire.
The music intensity drops down inversely. It sort of drops inverse to the activity of weapon fire. So it basically gets out of the way. But what's cool about it is it's a logical recomposition, right? Like it logically, procedurally, the music adjusts its density to leave space for the weapon fire.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually gonna go to
a really quick shout out to the talk at is it Florida? Patrick Hart's talk on meta sounds and music at UE Fest went up a couple of days ago, I think. Is maybe it's a little bit older than that, but it's called something like meta sounds. I'll find a link to it. It's an awesome way to look at a very light level of data oriented music stuff in UE. So I'll share a link to that in the chat.
I'll actually link it in the description, the video description.
It is also worth saying that this is the experience many have with the Lyra demo, is that it is. I remember it being described as a great way to make a game if you really know how to make a game, and that's often I don't know. It's a really obfuscated sort of way to work if you're not familiar with the gameplay ability system, the gas thing that everything in Lyra is so heavily built off, it can be really hard to find where things are going. At least in my experience, it's been really hard to find, like, oh, what calls what where.
Yeah, it's I agree. So here's, I mean, this is one of the challenges with making sample content, because I have worked on a lot of sample projects, and the so I've also been a teacher. I taught game audio and music production and sound design for about 5 years, and pedagogically, it doesn't make sense to start someone out with Project Lyra. It doesn't make any sense at all. I actually really like the approach taken by the latest sample templates. The stuff that was released just recently in 5.6, they like updated all of the like starter templates, and I like their approach. And their approach was like, how can I achieve this result with the least amount of work, right? Focusing on a blueprint oriented implementation. And I think that's a really great way to start, because it's like the practical applications for any subject is going to be an advanced form of that subject oftentimes. And so, but you can't really start someone out there. It doesn't really make sense. They're not going to be able to, it's just going to be very confusing. It's yours. You have to incrementally bring them in. So I totally agree with you. The reason Lyra exists, as I understand it, I think there is probably some debate on why and the way and why it was. But as I understand the initial reasoning, there was Valorant, I think it was, their executable is called Shooter Game.
Yeah.
I'll give you a guess of why. Okay, because they took the Shooter Game and they built Valorant on top of it. And no one should have ever built a game on Shooter Game after like 4.10.
I shouldn't have called it Shooter Game.
Well, there's
You don't want people
there's
to build
another
a shooter game. Don't call it Shooter Game.
There's another problem. Okay, so here's the thing, right? When you're coding a project, you have all the module references. That's why Project Lyra is called Lyra, because it's a very easy to find and replace that term. It's unlikely that you would have a hard time replacing that from your code base, right? Replacing with whatever you want. So that's part of it. The part of it is being able to just like easily rename the module. If it's like Shooter Game, who knows what you're gonna mess up there? Once you're like deep into the project. So that's one of the things. Internally, Shooter Game is just a proof of concept that you can incrementally upgrade a project from 4.0 to 5.6. That's what it's used for. It's a backwards compat test. And the implementation method, because I went into Shooter, because one of the things that we weren't really happy with was Shooter Game's audio presentation. When Aaron and I started digging in and we were talking about the new audio engine and trying to sort of, there was kind of like an image that we were trying to shift in terms of how people perceived Unreal Audio. And Shooter Game was not doing us any favors. Because it wasn't necessarily that it was bad, it was really out of date. If you listen to like the shooter aesthetic, there's a shift in sort of the late aughts. And I think part of this is the work done by Battlefield and Call of Duty on like an HDR shift, right? But also I think the rise of indie games that embrace silence, right? Like there was just allowing more dynamic interest in your audio presentation, right? everything that sort of precedes that is very noisy, very loud. And then you start to see this shift into an aesthetic that has less and less noise and is much more dynamic. And so shooter game was really feeling kind of old in the sound area. And it was done by some like an outsourced company that I think was briefly owned by Epic or something like that. It was some sort of weird studio relationship there. And so I started digging into sort of maybe I can take this on as a project. And I was like, this is crazy. Like some of the stuff that I was trying to implement, I was like, oh, there's like they didn't have collision. They had blocking volumes everywhere. It was just like, okay.
Yeah.
So it was very it just it's not it just didn't seem like a good base foundation. And there were embarrassing things in the like that custom sound cue node, as I mentioned, was not thread safe. The audio thread was introduced later,
Right.
and so then that was no longer threads. That was like that approach had to be fixed, and there was just little things like that that I think every discipline would be like, oh, I wouldn't do things like that anymore. So Lyra was an attempt to create a template project, and originally it was going to be very low visual art. Like it was going to be programmer art was the intention. And I remember, because this is one of the things that like Epic prides itself on its visual presentation. And so there was like at some point there was just like, nah, we're not going to do programmer art. We're going to make this look cool, like cool programmer art, And so I remember one day it was kind of late because this project, it's very short term. It's kind of late in the production, and they were like, we're going to contract 4 new animators. And I was like, what are you doing to me? Why?
Well, I mean, animation that won't have any change for audio. That'll be fine.
That's when I had to learn how to use anim modifiers to like automate tagging footsteps. Because suddenly it was like 400 or 800 animations. It was like, oh my goodness. Okay.
Especially with motion matching, everything starts getting crazier again.
Yeah. They didn't have motion matching then, but well, they had it in Paragon, but they didn't have it as we know it now. Public.
Yeah, let's see what Eric's doing.
Yeah, how's it going, Eric? You got it.
It's good.
finished?
Yeah, I
Or-
got it. I figured it out. So no, so I actually want to kind of pick on Audio Insights a bit because it isn't showing my meta sound for my pistol fire. So I'm sitting here trying to get my sound to play, and I'm hearing it, but I'm not seeing it come up. So I threw on the old school AU debug sound cues debug. And so now when I shoot, I know you can't hear it, but I've got my pistol fire up here on the top left. And when I shoot multiple shots, it's only playing the one sound. It's not spawning multiple audio components. Like if I shoot this shotgun, ignore the pistol. I kind of hacked in the pistol sound, but if I shoot multiple shotguns, it's going up to 3, which if you remember back to the concurrency, we had 3 per individual owner. And so what I did with the pistol, I kind of hacked it into the weapon base class here. I'm just saying, like, either spawn a sound if we don't have one already, or if we already have a sound, just execute the fire trigger on it. And then in the meta sound, I just removed on play and I made a new trigger called fire. And so every time we fire from the blueprint, we send that trigger, and then eventually it hits on finished, and then that stops the sound.
So basically, you have like a retrigger implementation.
Yeah.
So it retains the same meta sound instance if they retrigger before the tail ends, but otherwise it will end normally. Is am I hearing right?
Yep, that's right.
Cool.
And it's really good for weapons because then you're not spawning sounds every time you shoot, or you're spawning fewer sounds because you're probably still spawning impact sounds. And like stacking up lots of sounds on one single game frame can lead to hitches, especially if there's lots of people shooting at once. One thing you might want to do though is like give yourself like a delay so that there's a little more time here. Like maybe do a trigger delay of like 2 seconds or something, just so um, if there's tails, it will like all of these will finish on the accumulate, and then 2 seconds after the tail, just to keep it open, the window of time open that much longer for.
What about an alternate trigger input that also finishes it? So, for example, if they unequip the pistol, maybe you want to like end it.
Well, you can always just call fade out on the audio component in that case, which is
Okay,
probably
that's
what I
fair.
would typically do instead of
Yeah, that works.
making the call from within. But yeah, that would totally work too.
It is tricky with execute trigger parameters because they're really, really useful, but it's hard to know that you've executed all the right things in a meta sound if you start handling too much state in meta
Yeah,
sound. It's like you've got to
Mm.
choose
yeah,
whether you want to do the state in blueprint or the state in meta
yep,
sounds. And it sucks because it's like if execute trigger parameters are really good if you have like a loop that's playing and then you're like, oh, I want to play some sound when it's like off and I want to like crossfade into this like tail or something, and then they're really good. But there's definitely really hard to track state with meta sounds.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. I think that that's one of the things that I think it's just I feel like it's the graph type, like the type of
It's
graph
the nature
that
of
it's
the
a
DAG.
yeah, it's the render flow, data flow uh, um, of the graph just doesn't really lend itself to.
It's a directed acyclic graph, meaning you
Yeah,
can't have loops, and so it's hard to
yeah.
manage state
And
and
execution is sort of not really a thing.
yes.
Mm.
It seems like a thing, but it's not really a thing, right?
So I do have page settings applied now.
Yeah,
So if we want to make a
check it out.
page down version of this pistol fire, so let's say we're going to ship this on on an iPhone or something,
Hmm.
or Android. Um, there's two ways you can use pages, and there's paged graphs, and then there's paged inputs. And so I'll do the graph first. And to add a paged graph, you just need to have the pages tab. And note that I didn't have this available until I added the page settings in the project settings and then restarted my editor.
Yeah,
Um, but so now I have my mobile settings in here in the drop menu. And when I click that, it made a new graph. It's kind of hard to tell, but on the bottom here, it says graph page mobile. And so now this is a whole separate graph that has access to all of the same inputs, outputs, and variables. But if I were to start like removing some stuff, like let's say our phones, we don't need to have like this filtering. So I'm just going to like snip, get rid of this. And maybe we'll get rid of this stereo high shelf is what that one says. And honestly, let's just get rid of a lot of like this stuff too, because why not? And so now it's looking a bit more sparse. If I switch back to the default page, you can see that it pops back. And so now everything is as it was before. And then I can flip back to mobile and maybe do even more here. Like let's say we don't want to have this sweetener layer at all on mobile, but we'll leave our noise interiors and our what do we have here? Our mech. So this already is looking a lot cheaper to render and to compile because there's fewer nodes. As far as auditioning this graph goes, at the top left corner here, there's an audition button, and there's different settings in here. It has our platform that I enabled pages on, and so if I go to mobile, it sync with graph just means that if I'm looking at this page, it's now going to audition that page when I play it. And so if I fire it, I can see my relative render cost is now only going up to a maximum of 3, compared to if I go back to default. And I guess I could leave this on editor and it should be fine. Now my relative render cost is 4. So we get that extra voice that I removed on mobile.
Yeah, and your CPU went down from the regular to the mobile by like 0.4%, which is not too
Okay.
bad.
I mean, 0.4%, like, so that's, a good 20% difference if I go back to mobile. Let's just have a look here. Um, so it depends on how fast I fire, but it went from, about 0.5, right? So
Yeah,
those are big numbers, and those numbers actually get amplified when you're on a more constrained platform. And so if you see like on your beefy PC that you're getting a 25% performance benefit, then you're going to see a lot more um, on like on mobile or something. So that was page graph. Um, let's do the paged inputs now. So we've got a bunch of these arrays that are doing that have wave assets in them. And I'm just going to look and find some that have like lots of sounds in here. Need to make my windows bigger for there we go. Um, so I've got the noise interior array here, and it has 7 array inputs or elements. And I can add page default value here. And if I open this menu, it's got the same mobile page option. And when I click that, it's going to duplicate my array of 7 sounds into a mobile array right underneath the default. And now I can just go through here and just delete a few of these out. Let's say we only need like, let's do 3. And now if I save it, when this meta sound cooks into a build, it's going to strip away the 7 from the default, and you're only going to have these 3 waves in your meta sound. So this is really nice because it reduces the download size for people that are installing your game. It also has less memory loaded into, or uses less memory when you actually run the meta sound, because it's not loading as many chunks of audio into memory. And if you do that for all of these, all of the other arrays here, you start to see like, okay, we might reduce the overall memory footprint of this by 30% or so, like depending on how many variations you get rid of. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of pages. Any questions?
I mean, it's a massive saving when you think about doing this across your project and just cutting
Yes.
2 or 3 sounds out of every 8 to 12 sample random container thing you got going on. That's a huge saving, really.
It definitely adds up. So even if you're only removing one thing from an array, multiply that out by like hundreds or thousands, and it's quite considerable.
well, I think this, I, th- I think that the scale is the thing, the crux of it, right? Because like optimization, the sort of the feeling would be that the obvious target would be these sort of big, beefy implementations, which are, like in the case of the music system, which is super heavyweight here, is just one sound, right? It's just one instance. And so, but if you're looking at, say 100 of what you just did, like 100 of
Yeah.
these pistols or whatever, then you're looking at like, you know, the incremental aggregate of savings. And especially when you're talking about download size, you know, it may not be obvious, but bandwidth ain't free.
Yeah.
And if when you're talking about a project, let's say you got a game that has 1 million players and they're all downloading your patch from some server that's charging you by the bandwidth. If you can, like, you could be saving your company like millions of dollars,
Yeah.
just by these small reductions. So it's absolutely benefit. And yeah, something that I feel like this is interesting because we talked about this before, and I'm curious about, because I feel like it's one of these things you can debate. But it's like this, uh, the pruning of wave references feels like something you could do at any time. Like anytime you're sort of like past the approval process for your sound, let's say you're a sound designer, you're working on a sound, and you're like, these are the sounds I want, and everyone, and your sort of AD or whoever that's signing off on the design is like, yeah, those are the sounds. I feel like at that stage you could absolutely start pruning. You're like, these are my, because it's already in your brain, and you're like, these are my
Mm-hmm.
3 best variants, of my list
Yeah,
or whatever,
choose them.
these are the perfect footsteps. Uh, and the graph, one of the things that I get sort of caught up on, I don't know if it's an important thing or not, but when your approach to the graph retopology is simply reductive, it changes the mix. Your power changes, right? The power, the impact, the amplitude impact that this sound has on the final mix presentation changes proportionally, changes. Which means that this pistol is going to be quieter on the mobile platform because you like removed a layer like wholesale.
But sorry, I lost my mouse. Where's my mouse? You can change the. Oh, there we go. You can also page like your float. So like, let's say we removed a bunch of sounds. I want to turn it up on mobile now to compensate.
Right. I just bring it up because that is often
Take
the
that,
sort of
Dan.
it's a take that Dan. No, that's good. I mean, that's really great.
It's a good
I
consideration. You're right. Like it is something that it could get away from you all of a sudden, and
Yes.
it drifts away from you when you're thinking about mixing it. Because, like you said, if I think it depends on how you like to mix. Some people like to mix in the meta sound, the value for turning it up or down. Some people like to mix in sound classes or in other methods. But if you are mixing everything in a meta sound graph, then turning it up or down may be a bigger consideration when you're doing
well,
pages and things as well.
hold on a second. The meta sound output is just like any other sound output, and the mixing happens in the submix
Hmm.
graph. But if you have, say, for example, a compressor in your submix graph, then this sound is going to contribute differently
Yeah,
to that, and it's a nonlinear transformation of the sound. So it's going to change. That could seriously change the way that pistols sound versus any other sound. Especially, let's say if you got a sound that's just like one that's a very simple graph already, and you're not going to adjust it. That sound is not going to, relatively adjust its power in the mix. And so that's sort of what I was getting at is like with you showed pruning, but there's also the option to have a mixed variant. Like for example, all those layers could be combined externally, your DAW or whatever, mixed together as like a mobile variant, and then that could be played as a single sound,
Mm-hmm.
and it would retain the relative power of the original presentation, but be cheaper.
Yeah,
mm.
100%. This is the music meta sound, by the
Yeah.
way. Not gonna harp on this one, but just curious to see what's going on. And actually, I don't want to dive in on this because I did say I wanted to come back to the insights trace when we were looking at, um, what's going on with all of these kind of nested things that are happening. And so, as it turns out, each time we have this build graph operator, these pink rectangles, those are our subgraphs inside of our. This one's a pistol weapon fire. And so, coming back here, we can kind of start looking at what some of those nodes are. For instance, we've got this wave player crossfader. And so, if I just open this one up, we've got a bunch of stuff going on in here. And we've got some more subgraphs here. We've got gated wave player. So we've got we're kind of 3 layers deep now. We had our pistol weapon fire is the top layer. We go down one. I guess we only go down twice. So 3 layers nested 2 deep is what I would say. And so that's reflected in our trace here. We can see we've got our top level meta sound. Then we go down a layer. We've got this was the first nested deep, and then we've got all of these that are like down on the bottom. And so this is kind of like you're digging out all of the change from the couch. You're trying to get as much performance out of your assets as possible. A trick here is to try and flatten your graphs, right? And not do as much of this deeply nested meta sound kind of rabbit holes. Because what's happening here, and this is all subject to change. Like there's always things being optimized on meta sound, so it's not going to stay like this forever. And I'm not telling anyone not to use patches or anything, but as far as performance goes, it is more performant to not use patches. It would be cheaper if all of this stuff lived one layer up higher on the top level graph. Just throwing that out there. Another thing that kind of benefits from doing that is, let's say we've got 3 gated wave players here, and inside each of them we are getting random asset from this array. And actually, let me see if I can find a better example. Maybe from I had one earlier, but basically, if you have 3 arrays that you're pulling from, like close, distant, and far, and then in here you're also like pulling. Well, this is the same array. My point is that you can sometimes reduce the amount of nodes that you have overall if it's kind of shared between some of these nodes that are pretty easy to copy and paste into the same graph. So that's just something to
because
consider.
you might be doing more work that you already have done somewhere else or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're just you can use the same nodes for a lot of. I'm trying to think of an example, but it's pretty easy to get lulled into a sense of, oh, this isn't that complex because the nodes are hidden inside of this one. But if we've got this node plus all these other nodes, and you just see the amount of work that's going on kind of all over the place, what's happening is that you're increasing the amount of time it takes to compile this graph. And again, coming back here, we can see this particular one took 5.5 milliseconds. And that's because all of these tiny little ones down on the bottom, this is like validating operator outputs are bound. And so in these create operator functions, it's taking all of the inputs and all of the outputs, it's connecting all the wires, and it's doing that under the hood at runtime. And that's mainly because the builder supports changing those connections at runtime. And so that's why they're not cooked out earlier in the process. And so, yeah, just want to point that out, that, it's pretty easy to go down these rabbit holes, and they can cause a lot of performance if you're not using them with relative care. Like, I think my personal advice would be to use subgraphs more for practical purposes. Like if you need the abstraction, or if it has a lot of things going on in the subgraph, it's easier to justify it than it is to have, like, this one's probably, I wouldn't say this is a very good subgraph to patch out, because you're paying extra cost just to connect these wires up to the wires that are like outside of it. Sorry, it's just extra connection cost is really it. And yeah,
Right, but here it's being used as a shorthand, right? Like it's
which I mean, I think it's maybe a bit silly to try and, if it works, it works, right? But if you're also trying to squeeze out performance on like an iPhone or something, like this is where I would start, because it's the easiest to just kind of de-nest that, and then you get free performance that way.
So that might be a good example of something that you do right towards the end of the process, when you are needing to squeeze something that isn't probably going to be worked on anymore, because
Yeah.
patches and graphs are great for maybe alleviating the time that designers need for refactoring choices or changing and operating on things. Sounds like you want to talk about the operator cache, though. That's what
Yes.
I want to hear about.
Yeah, and to your point, like this is stuff that you would only do if you needed it, and you're
Yep.
probably only going to need it if you're shipping on mobile or Switch, or some of these lower CPU platforms. Um, so yeah, let's talk about the operator cache a bit. And so the reason you would want to use the operator cache is if you have like a big weapon fire graph, for instance. Like this is a pretty beefy graph. It takes 5.5 milliseconds to compile on my PC. And if we're firing these all the time, which we're not firing them as much now that we're re-triggering it, but we still want to add it to, oh, I'm still running. We still want to like cache a few instances of it so that it doesn't have to compile it every time that we want to play the sound. And so I'm just going to grab the level blueprint because I don't want to make one. Um, but this would probably be something you'd use as like a game feature action in like in your game feature plugins. I don't think we have a game feature action as part of. Let's see. Do we have a
Can you
plugins?
explain a game feature action?
Yeah. So if you're using game feature plugins, which highly recommend doing it's a way of breaking your game up into individual game features that can be loaded and activated or unloaded and deactivated at runtime, and that will load and unload parts of the feature. Like for instance, this is the shooter core, so I'm assuming like this would be used for like all of the important weapons and maybe some of the like ability. Like I'm not too familiar with Lyra. I'm not sure how its plugin is constructed, but on this game feature data asset, which lives inside of the root of this plugin, there's a data asset, and there's an array here called game feature actions. And I just added an element to the array, and in here are a bunch of just these are basically just U objects that have functionality in them. For instance, this add components one is probably going to be for adding, this adds an elimination feed relay to the game state. And so like you can just add components to the Lyra character. So this is your equipment manager component. You could put like a weapon fire audio component on the player or on the weapon or wherever you want it. You can set the target and the component that you want to add. Um, yeah, I don't see like a add meta sound pre-cache operator or anything. So that's why I'm just going to show you the blueprint nodes, and then if you want to make a game feature action, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to get the meta sound cache subsystem, and let's just do it on begin play of my level. I want to see, I think it's pre-cache. Yeah. So there's pre-cache meta sound, and then there's touch or pre-cache meta sound, which I believe, I think we can use that here. Yeah. So it's the same as pre-cache, except if it already exists, it will be moved to the top instead of building another one. So let's just go ahead and do that. And so this might be a good instance where I would actually make a struct. And I'm, again, just going to make a mess of this project. And we're going to call it pre-cache metasound. And I'm going to give it a metasound asset. Do a metasound source.
I feel like the pre-cache and touch would be useful on, say, let's say your weapon when you equip it.
Yeah, that'd be
I'm assuming pre-cache and touch. Touch means loaded. Is that what that is?
I think
it moves it, right? That's the move.
Yeah, I forget the.
So when you have a cache, it's going to be some pool, right? And so it's probably like a LRU or something, right? Some predefined value. Is a operator cache have some sort of pool size?
Mm-hmm. So that's why I made an array here, because I want to be able to specify a meta sound, for instance, the pistol fire. And then I want to cache maybe like 3 instances of it. So we've got enemies that are using the same meta sound. If we had like a master, like a base source, and then have like a preset for each of the weapon types, like a pistol preset, I would cache the top level graph, and then all of the presets of this parent graph would benefit from using the cache. But so now I want to just grab my array here. Going to cache each of these just like this. And so now I can cache as many meta sounds as I want. Granted, you are going to be loading these into memory, and they're going to stay there until you remove them from the cache. Which I wonder if we have. Yeah, we have removed cached operators for meta sound for when you want to free up some memory. And that's really all there is to it. And so again, what this means is that if I cache 3 instances of pistol fire, it's going to, anytime that sound plays, it's going the cache is going to provide instances that are already compiled, and so it won't cost nearly as much to play the meta sound. And if you go over the number of cached instances, like let's say we have 4 people that are shooting pistols, then you would have a cache miss, and so it's going to automatically compile a new instance of the meta sound. Does that make sense?
What about the I mean, this is great. I'm going to do this afternoon. But so variables or something that you would know, like metasound inputs that you would pass in, you're just providing the instance, so that would still work, right? Because you're providing the instance and then you pass in that happens after you've provided an instance to play because you're just replacing the build step. Is that right?
Yeah, and so like I said, you can also use presets that have different input values on them, and it will work. The only gotcha there is that if you have any constructor inputs, those are actually going to cause cache misses, I believe, because um, those inputs are compiled into the builder, and then if you try to change that, it doesn't like that. So if you have a parent graph that has preset, if you have a parent graph that has constructor inputs and then you have presets of that are trying to change it, it's not going to be friendly with the cache. So that's kind of the only main consideration there.
And in terms of unloading and loading these actions, whether they're game feature actions or something else, is this something that you would? Is there a setup way to do this as opposed to do you put this on a volume? So when they enter a volume, you pre-cache the stuff that's in that the marketplace where there's going to be people doing something that's very complicated, or is this like a how broad stroke do you go with these kind of things? Do you just use this for the really granular, expensive sound that sucks, or do you sort of try and manage it? And it's a big question, but
Yeah, and I think it obviously is going to depend on the project and the nature of how many sounds you have loaded or how many sounds you encounter in your experience. Just remember, like if you start trying to micromanage this, I would imagine it could become difficult at some point. Like you're trying to allocate memory and deallocate it, and it would be a challenge to contend with. I think you're just always going to have to be considerate of how much you have loaded in the cache, and maybe you could make some sort of fancy wrapper around this, where like a memory manager blueprint. That okay, we've got too many meta sounds in there. We got to kick something out before we can add something. I don't know. I at least in my experience, it's a lot easier just to kind of keep it hands off and only cache what's absolutely necessary. And again, like this is something you shouldn't do unless you notice in your traces like that you would benefit from it. Just always be profiling, because you're gonna want to be able to see day to day or week to week how your performance is trending. And I would again just reminder of premature optimization is unnecessary, and not to let these things bog you down creatively.
And just on that profiling step, could you run over where we would expect to see the values before and after the cache in
Hmm.
terms of what functions we should be profiling? Because this seems like it seems like a little bit of a get out of jail free card in some way. And I like the idea of providing a get out of jail free card when you have something really complex like a
Hmm.
weapons blueprint that's like, okay, weapons blueprint, super complicated. Weapons meta sound, super complicated. It's okay that it's super complicated because it sounds great and it does all the things that we need. So I want to give you a small get out of jail free card for this one. And because I don't see a designer stumbling into the meta sound cache and setting this up, that's probably not going to happen
No,
too quickly. So
Well, and it's not free,
yeah,
nope.
right? Because
It's
you
not.
have because it's cache pool. So like if you've got a really big meta sound, um, all of the operator data,
it's all
the
loaded and
memory size of that, and
yeah.
then how many instances is going to be just sitting there in your memory. So
Mm,
I kind of
it's
look at
it's the
it.
constant tension between CPU and memory, right? Like that's always what we're contending with, and it's like, well, we can save some CPU over here, but we're gonna have to take a memory over here, right?
yep.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, I was
Yep.
just gonna say it's kind of a constant balancing act between memory and CPU. The more memory you use, the less CPU you need to use, and then vice
Yeah.
versa. Granted, there are some situations where you can get more bang for your buck. It's not always an even trade. Um,
And it
but
can be target platform dependent, right? Like some
yes,
platforms may have an abundance of memory and be CPU constrained, and some platforms may have really kick-ass CPUs but kind of low
yeah.
memory offerings.
But to answer David's question about where would you look, right? And that would be the first function that we looked at before.
To do
I,
work.
I always search for metasound do work. Um, and so now I've got that list of all of the metasounds that we played, and we can see the number of times that we played them, and we can see how long it took on average to compile each instance of them. If I
Yep.
sort by the average time, we can see music jumped to the top. But notice we only built that one time. So it really wouldn't benefit us at all to cache that because that would,
Yeah.
you could change the time, like when that loads. In this case, it loads at the start of the level. So it's probably when you would cache it anyways. But if you're in a big open world and you wanted to cache this, that's going to sit in memory the entire time from when you entered it into the cache, and so you might not even need it until you go to the location, right? So um, music typically isn't something I would recommend caching. But something like weapons pistol fire, where we have 119 instances of it, and it cost 3.16 milliseconds on average, that would be a very good one. We'd get a lot of benefit from just pooling a few of those and then not having to, the count would be a lot lower, right? If I recorded another trace now that I've added it to the cat, it'd be hard to kind of recreate this trace because I didn't like it's not scientific, right? I'd have to use like the same replay
Same
of what
rate.
I just
Yeah, on the
did,
same taters.
which you can do in like a closed environment. I sometimes will go into like an empty level. I'll empty a magazine, and record a trace of that, and then I'll change stuff, load into the level, r- dump another magazine, and record that, and then I've got like two side by side, like A B comparison, where I can look and see what was the average time on A, what was the average time on B, and make sure that what I'm doing is actually going to improve performance.
Right. But
Otherwise,
even that is
yeah,
not necessarily a authentic,
not
data sample,
necessarily.
right? Like because the actual play is the use case, right?
Yeah.
There was a really interesting. I mean, I love that you're talking about this because it is one of those ones where this is the erroneous QA Jira bug problem, right? Where it's like, well, I feel like I did the same thing as you, and it's like, oh yeah, but you're in a slightly different location, and in that location there's a GPU crash, but here there isn't. So there was a really good talk at Unreal Fest in Gold Coast in 2022. 23, I'm going to say, or maybe 24, where there was, maybe it was by Riot, there was some automated testing talk. I'll have to find it, but there's a talk about how you could set up autoplay behaviors so that your pawn walks up, picks up the gun, shoots, turns around, jumps, or whatever. And it feels like that there's value in that when you think at scale, but it is definitely trickier when to adopt it, because whenever I've used auto test stuff, it feels like I spend a lot of time maintaining the auto tests through breaking changes and stuff. So sometimes just spawning into an empty, like as long as you have the facility to spawn into an empty level and fire a gun, and you're playing an FPS game, I think you have most of what you need for the base elements there, and then anything that you have on top of that's great. As long as you don't have to like go through the main menu and click 10 different things to open a game and then run a different level and then hit play. But that, this looks great. I mean, I've got a great project I'm working on at the moment where I'm looking at a bunch of performance stuff. So I'm going to try this out and let you know. But the definitely, it's a very it's a very mysterious sort of part of the engine in terms of how you would find this without being shown by you guys. But it's really cool.
And visually, it's intimidating. Like you open this up and you're like, I don't know what's going on here. And there's a lot that it shows you that isn't maybe relevant to what you're interested in.
It reminds me of the Metasound Builder. It's like when we spoke about the Metasound Builder, and I was like, right, so this does this, and you're like, no, not quite. No, it does this, and I'm like, oh, okay, but it says build. Yeah, well, it doesn't really build. I mean, it's sort of architects. And you're like, oh, okay, so this thing does it? No, like, no, not that one. And it's just one of those things where it's a combination of like, it's there to solve a very specific problem, and unless you know what the problem is, you don't want to be pulling at every thread on the jumper all of a sudden. So this definitely seems like a cool way to use, to save memory or spend memory for CPU.
Or just to be informed on how to make those decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and stuff's changing. Like it's like this today. Who knows what it'll be like tomorrow?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there's performance optimizations for any feature is going to be ongoing, any active feature. What's cool is what Eric has shown here is this is a general purpose Unreal Engine utility. So this is relevant for tech artists, is relevant for tech designers, it's relevant for anyone who has tech in their title.
As in the operator cache is?
No. The Unreal Insights.
This is what okay.
What we're looking at here is Unreal Insights. This is Unreal Insights.
And so, fun fact, like Audio Insights actually is kind of built on top of this data, and it's basically a separate view. It takes only the audio stuff that we actually care about, and it surfaces it in a nicer way to look at things. And what I'm showing right now is I highlighted the spawn sound at location event. So like you can search your game thread for like all the sounds that you spawned at location. We can see we spawned a few 2D sounds. I mean, I don't like sit and look at this stuff, but like you can go and find like all of your gameplay cues. Like let's see when did we dash? All right, like let's see. Oh, Dash has quite a lot going on there. What's this giant big thing? Oh, Niagara. Niagara has like 38 seconds of something going on there. 42.4 milliseconds. Here's our meta sound. Something going on meta sound wise.
Yeah, being a good neighbor is tending your garden, right? Like it's making sure that you're not one of the stressors on the performance of the project. But it always looks good when you're smaller than the other person, right? Like
like look at that. Audio is like this over here, and then it's like, oh geez. There's probably some audio in here as well. This is the on burst event for the GCNL. So I would expect. I guess maybe not.
Yeah, there wasn't much to the dash.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
the
it's
dash is also
tricky
kind of
and
a simple meta sound.
it's diagnostic, and it's not something you need to be looking at all the time. But I've found definitely it's a way for me to find out if I've done something stupid before you find out I've done something stupid, because I could. Frame counts and frame rates are really not that reliable in engine. Your computer's beefy and you just hit play and it runs at 60 FPS and it's locked or something. So you think like, great, my system's awesome. And then, some engineer later on is looking at it and they ping you saying like, hey, by the way, this system you made 44 milliseconds every, and you're like, oh, I guess I didn't see it. I was looking at it. And I think for us we just care about how it sounds. So if it sounds really good, we might finally have gotten it to sound good and then just forgot to check little things like this. So doing a small little recording and I like to put a scope counter on something and then put the highlighter section and just be like, as long as I don't show up in the first page of results, then I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think there are some intuitive presentations, right? Like if I look at my metasound graph and I'm like, this is complicated looking, then I know instinctively that is probably just going to cost more, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a cost just for every connection, right? That's like, so just having a big cobweb metasound, Charles, right away you can be like, yeah, this is, yeah, I don't even need to see the numbers. Like I know this is, and sometimes I think the other thing that I think, so first of all, there's like, you can sort of intuit that. And like Eric said, that can be concealed by patches. Like there, it can be a little surprise. You're like, what is under the rock? There's more cobwebs. That's. But I think also there is a conversation to be had. That it is about an ecosystem. It is about the what we're looking at here with the insights trace is everyone. It's all of us working together on this, and
Yeah.
sometimes the work is justifiable, right? Sometimes you have that hero moment or that focal moment, and that is like, okay, yes, we value that, and so if we need savings, maybe we'll cut it in other places we didn't anticipate normally. Maybe we would make savings in something that's like a medium sized thing, which you wouldn't normally go after because you want to make room for the thing that's cool.
I just counted 59 wave players on one render block for the music.
Yeah, that sounds about
So
right.
each of these yellow tiny little rectangles is the wave player operator execute. And I counted 59 of them, and then I was just curious to start looking. Okay, where do we have 59? Does this look like 59 wave players? And that's kind of the point, like where things you can hide in the rocks, right? We've got like this dovetail, which has 2 wave players in each of them, but then this one has dovetail from array, which has oh, it's the same thing. But yeah,
It's just
so
extra deep.
yeah, it's a lot, but
But
that's
it
fine.
also goes to say, like, when you do use patches like this liberally, you can have a problem sort of back propagating fixes to them because you might be blending some problem in the middle of a chain. If there's something
Yes.
nested within something nested with something, and then you just change the middle of the horse to be a giraffe, then the front and end of the horse is still a horse, but it's
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
giraffe's body, and you just hope that everyone looks at that and goes, "That's a pretty looking horse." So it is, yeah, it's really it. You bring up a really good point there of like keeping track of it, and probably that regression testing, like you said, of actually tracking, well, how much did we bloat in the last, what's the change over the course of the project. It's a relatively lightweight thing to do, and it probably prevents what is usually bad practice but not malpractice. It's one of those things where I feel like when I've shown someone something in Metasounds, they just weren't aware that it was expensive or bad to play 4 wave players, because I thought like, well, it's 4 wave players, that's okay. And then someone else used that patch 4 times and then it became 16, but
Yeah.
they didn't think it was expensive either. So It's yeah, definitely tricky. That relative render cost feels like it should be bigger and a big bar across the screen or something. I should be able to set like a min max render cost, and then it should fill up the bar, and I should be
Yeah.
like, it should turn red along the top or something to show me that, like, hey, you said relative render cost can only be 8, and it's a project's setting somewhere,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think is now available in the settings, in the project settings, is the ability to to use relative render cost as the voice cost for the global concurrency count. Right. So
Ooh.
right now, without doing anything, a meta sound, regardless of how many wave players you've got in it, is one voice, a very sneaky voice, right? But there's an option um, to switch it over, and so that it'll use the RRC as the determiner for the weight of that.
God,
Sound.
I'll never find that why that voice is being culled unless that's clear
Are,
somewhere.
are you
Uh,
looking for it?
I
Is
can't
it
find it. It might be a like a INI files thing, or
okay?
I didn't
Maybe
see
it's
it in
not even out
project
yet.
settings.
Maybe I forget it. Forget what I said. No, no, that's coming. If it's not out, it's coming. But yeah, I think the long term is to expound on that. We sort of talked about that before, like sort of other things that generate audio,
Mhm.
or have like a render, like an additional render cost, maybe like an effect, like a delay effect, for example, is also rendering. Um,
Is the render cost expressed in metadata somewhere? Like, could I write an asset validator that warns me at render cost
it's
amounts or
just, I
something?
think it's just wave players right now. That's something we've talked about. I don't know if there's anything that's
Yeah,
built for that yet.
the thing that's hard about that though is like you might have part of your graph disconnected from the wave player, and then you connect it at runtime, and so
Yeah.
the voice cost or the relative render cost would be different in the editor versus at runtime. Um,
What
which
I suggested a really wonderful feature that they ignore every single time I suggest. I've multiple times I've suggested this, is that the cost of the node should be presented in the size of the node. So if something's really expensive, it should just be really big on the graph. It just take a bunch of space. And so then it's really obvious, right? How much does this cost? It's like 2 screen scrolls. Like I just right? Like that's I got to zoom out to like 10, and then I can see it. No, that I think would be, really great.
I think we should have nodes move away from the mouse as they're like based on how expensive they are. So the really expensive ones are like really really fast. So you're trying to sort of
Yeah.
catch them.
Or like the menu itself was doing the context menu, and you're like going
Yeah,
to add
just
another wave player. It's like, hold on, you've got enough of those. Just sort of like,
yeah, there's sort of a really unhelpful Bidgy Clippy on the side being like, do you need any more wave players? Aren't you done?
yeah. Yeah, Clara, we did that was we you missed all of it. We talked all about that. We had
We
all
did.
all
It
the
will be
answers.
in the replay. All the answers,
All
actually.
the answers.
I think we covered a
Well,
good amount of
yeah,
stuff.
this was really great, Eric.
I would love to hear you talk about memory next time, because it feels like that's a great, comparison to this. This is something that everyone could sort of start using profiling and getting across it. But if we just shift everything into memory, then it's just a different problem we want to solve there too.
Well, and I think with memory, we would also maybe want to talk about the stream cache. And actually, ooh, this is good, because I am trying to convince Max Hayes, the one and
Yes.
only, the legend, to join us for next week. We'll see if I can.
Please get someone else to talk about memory.
But I think, if I recall correctly, Max actually worked on stream cache.
Yes.
He
Well,
had
I
to
don't
own
know,
it
but
after Ethan Geller left. And so yeah, that would be a good one. But But we did touch on some memory stuff, like the pruning
Yeah.
of the
Yeah,
variants and stuff like that.
so memory is just tricky because recording memory insight traces is actually kind of hard. Like there's just so many allocations of memory that you can capture in your recording that it's very slow. It's prone to crashing if you don't if you haven't filtered your LLM tags properly. Um, we'll see. I can maybe get something going with Lyra, but it's it's not my strong. It's not my like expertise. I think it'd be better to have someone else come in and talk about memory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
you
terrified of learning how to profile memory. I feel like once I profile it, I'm just going to be real upset with what I've done.
I always forget how.
We just get someone else to do it, you know?
Okay.
We just wait until somebody else tells us that we're using too much memory, and then we say, that can't be us. That's not possible. And then they say, I'm pretty sure it is because this is this tag. And we say, no, I've already fixed that. That can't be us. It's not happening on my machine. And then we just sort of sign off early and push to prod. So
I mean, on a very basic level, you have this size map, right? I wouldn't say this is like deeply useful information, but it does show on disk that
Yeah,
this
that's the
shotgun is
pack data.
11.9 megabytes. I can also change it to memory size, and so now we see that when it's in memory, it's got 1.4 instead. And you can see all of the wave assets that we have in there are represented down here. So this can give you a rough idea, and I believe there's even like I thought there was a column for it, but
But it helps you find soft and hard reference costs. You know, you cast to something in a blueprint and then suddenly it bloats by 20 megabytes and you're just like, oh shit, what happened?
yeah.
Yeah. There's more to memory though,
For sure.
especially when you're talking about disk streaming and the sort of bandwidth that you have, because if you kind of recall, like one of the big promises of the next generation was high speed streaming from disk, right? And that's kind of if you map the trajectory of insanity for game sizes and how much data must be presented to the user during runtime, um, being able to read and retrieve from disk is like really important, and being able to do that really faster and faster and faster, and more of it at once is really important. And that's like I think it was like Mark Cerny talk on the PS5, like a whole section on disk streaming advancements and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's part of it too, because it's not just the memory itself, the size of it, but also the management of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, it was a vast oversimplification of it. But if you go back to my screen here, I changed my content browser to columns view, and then there's a disk size thing you can look at, and now I can see like the music system is like the biggest, and it just gives you a rough like if you want to know which meta sounds have the most stuff, this can give you at least at a glance view at some of those.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nice.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's thank you, Eric.
Yeah,
No
man.
problem. I'm actually I love talking about this stuff. It's fun to look at numbers, and you get to kind of be a scientist a bit when you're experimenting, like A/B testing and trying to figure out how to squeeze every last CPU cycle out of a switch or something.
Right.
It's good times.
I mean, it's a skill that we forget that we need because we're so used to just sort of opening the editor, throwing a bunch of stuff in and being like, yeah, I think it's great. Performance will get better in shipping builds or whatever. So when you really want to, you want everything to be heard and you want to run as many sounds as possible, like these are the optimizations we have to make. So being aware of them and helping designers be aware of them is communicating why they're important or why what someone's doing is tricky. I feel like all of us talking about it and hearing you talk about why or how to communicate why pages are helpful and how we can use them probably saves a lot of heartbreak from needing to make changes later that you just don't understand. And usually in some projects I've worked on where someone says that we need to cut size or cut performance, it's kind of like we don't cut with a scalpel, we cut with a cleaver, and that's the time that we have. So I think this is a way to at least be able to give somebody which cleaver you'd like them to cut with, or doing some of the smaller cuts yourself and then hoping that they don't
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah, I like the latter approach. My feeling is, and this is I remember talking to Seth about this, but the performance savings has to be a whole team effort. It has to be sort of a burden that's shared across all the people. Whether it's the sound designer working on the meta sound, or even if the sound designer doesn't touch the engine, right? Just like having variants for, like, as I mentioned before, as for alternative variants, for doing that up front when the sound design is present in their sort of mind, and the work and the paint over and all whatever they're doing is there, and the designer who's handling the meta sound implementation or the blueprint implementation. And I think that is how you can take those big chunks out, because if everyone's sharing that burden, they can protect the important parts. They know what that is. If you leave that up to some third person, they're not going to understand what is important.
Yep.
They're going to go in and sort of make their own estimation, and if they know, they know. If they don't, they don't, and they're just going to chop maybe something you care about off. Well,
we literally, I had that happen on the very first FPS I worked on. We were at a studio using a different engine. It wasn't really about the engine, but at one point they said, yeah, we've been able to ship and the performance is great and everything. And when we played it, there was no acoustic, like all the acoustic stuff we'd made was all gone. Like all the propagation and everything just didn't sound right at all. With first person shooter sounded wild. And they just said, well, oh yeah, we just like saw that it was taking time, so we just cut it. And I was just like, that was the whole acoustics, all the reverb, all the propagation, all the reflections, everything was all just cut because the person cutting it didn't need to talk to someone. And obviously in you don't want anybody to do that, but when it comes down to the wire and there's something on some device for some important show or something, it can happen. So yeah, definitely communicating and being a part of it, especially with something that's necessarily not in audio, like garbage collection or something that floats around that is our problem, but we just don't see it as our problem because it doesn't end up in our bucket. At least this hopes, we just at least tend our own garden here, and then if our garden happens to spill over into someone else's, well, then they can help us there.
Yep. Yeah. I remember we were on I think it was Robo Recall, and looking at like disabling the HRTF filter for a VR game was a pretty significant choice to make. And so savings had to be found to sort of protect that, right? That's sort of like the thing.
Yeah.
And that's that's part of the participation process, right? Like you have to be part of the conversation. And at the same time that you have to be included in the conversation. Sometimes you're not, right? Sometimes those decisions are, especially if you're a contractor, those decisions may be made after your contract's done. And so you're not really included in that process, which can be problematic.
Yep. Rip. That's definitely never happened to me. That hasn't happened recently. No, so yeah, no, you're totally right. You're totally right. You could write something that's super robust and feels great to you and everyone that used it to work on it. But then at the end of the day, if you've made something so good that it outlasts you, then part of your responsibility is the communication of the value of the thing that you've made that outlasts you. And that might not be that easy because you might have a brand new audio director that's pulling in components for a new game altogether and looks at it and goes like, well, I don't, it's fine. We'll write something for this,
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep. Cool. Well, we are at time. I apologize, Angela. I never got to your question. Tough cookies. No, Angela just had a
You
question
can't
about.
not answer it
I
now.
know. I know.
Imagine
No,
we
it's
spend the next 10 minutes talking about how we should answer the question.
it's one of those questions that comes up a lot, and it's just like why am I hearing the sounds differently when I bring them into the engine? There's lots of reasons. From your like so we've talked about a lot is uh, and I say we and talk, I mean in the community like Discord and stuff like that. I've addressed this a lot. And it's basically there's a lot going on. So if you, for example, when you're in your DAW and you're working on a mono sound, your DAW, and I've several, I think Reaper, Cubase, Pro Tools, even maybe, they all present mono as double mono. In other words, if you're listening on stereo speakers, you get full power on both speakers, which is a lie. It's a lie. If you have a single because if you have stereo, yes, that's accurate. But if you have a mono sound, it should be less powerful, right? If you have a stereo sound and a mono sound, the stereo sound should be louder. It's two sounds. It's two whole sounds. And what happens is your DAW will route it equally to both speakers. And then and that's not how the default behavior of Unreal is, because Unreal is about presenting sounds as they would be spatialized effectively, right? So you bring in a mono sound and by default it's going to up mix it to stereo, and the method that it uses by default is going to be equal power, which means you're going to hear a 3 dB reduction on both speakers for the sound. That has a lot of fallout because of the way perception and human hearing works, as I described. If you look at this, is why my answer was Fletcher Munson, which is the most useless response to any. But you need to know your Fletcher Munson curves or your equal loudness contours. And so what that means is we're more sensitive to volume changes in the articulate ranges, right? Because our hearing is focused around interacting with other humans, and so the articulate ranges are that's like 2 to 8K, and that's where our sounds are. And so those sounds, we're more sensitive to changes in the volume of those sounds as compared to other sounds. And so what happens as a result is just lowering the volume of a sound will automatically make it sound duller. And so that's part of it. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Got a comedian in the chat room here. That's part of it. So you're bringing it in. You've got a mono up mix that's going to affect the volume presentation. Now you can go in the settings and change that to dual mono, and I think we also have like a linear, so it's like 6 dB difference. But the idea is that it's presenting the mono as if it's coming from the center of your image, which is not the same as both speakers full volume. Also, the codec that's involved, like different codecs. A lot of our codecs are perceptual codecs. Perceptual codecs prioritize human speech and deprioritize sort of frequency ranges which are less important to our general perception of sound. And I say that because that's very subjective choice to make. But high frequencies, for example, are a really easy win for perceptual codecs because there's a lot of data in there. And if you can remove that without anyone really noticing, then it's a win, right? It's a performance win. And so you'll hear, if you have like a high, like bird tweets or something like that, you may need to adjust the quality of your codec. Uh, you may be getting some effect impacting the brightness of your sound because of that. And then the other thing is that I don't know if this is still the case. I don't know how long it's been there. When it changes, when it's been changed, I think people have talked about changing it. But the Unreal Audio Mixer, the renderer, renders in 32-bit float. That means that the Unreal Audio engine effectively has an absolutely insane dB headroom, like 1500 dB, which is like vaporization of sound or something ridiculous, like plasma or something like that. Anyway, it's a ridiculous
hole.
value. Yeah, exactly. It's just like destroy the earth. Like Krakatoa, I think, was like 300 dB. Like, so that's like, think about it like that. So 1500 or something like that dB headroom is great when you're mixing because you're not going to clip for miles. You're not going to clip. But then you have the output to hardware, and the hardware is not going to be floating point. And so you have to rein in those values, and you have to have a value that's between 0 and 1, or a 0 and 100%, right? 100% being the maximum value, right? And so your audio hardware, on the pass from the renderer to the audio hardware, there's going to be just a limit. There's a clip. It's just going to clamp the value on the output, which for loud sounds is going to result in a square wave, right? That's what we call clipping. It results in a whole bunch of, like, I think, odd ordered harmonics. And so by default, there's a configuration option for your platform that reduces the output to provide extra headroom. And I think by default, it's -3 dB. So yes, just bringing a sound into the engine without changing anything, it's going to be quieter. It's going to sound a little duller. This is, by the way, the crux of the loudness wars is that our brains are just better stimulated by louder sounds. When we A/B sounds, we're listening to our DAW, and we listen to the Unreal Audio Engine. We're going to think, why does my sound lesser? Why does the quality of it seem to be reduced? And it's not. It's just one is louder and one is quieter. And you can go back in and change those values, and get it the same. The only other thing that happens that changes your audio is we still have this finicky little legacy part of the sound wave, which is that the sound wave has a uncompressed data store of 16-bit PCM wave data. So if you're bringing in audio from your DAW and it's 24-bit or 32-bit, you import it in, it will convert it to 16-bit. And it's not like a finesse conversion. It's just gonna chop off the bits. So as I understand it, I don't know if we've implemented any special. I don't think we've implemented any dithering. Let me put it that way. And so that's something you may want to think about when you're preparing your assets. Is dithering in advance. Like I'm going to bring it in, and maybe you want a little. But here's the thing about dithering, is that generally speaking, with game audio, you're going to have so much going on. You're probably not going to hear any quantization. It's all going to be masked. All your quantization error is going to be masked. The only way that it wouldn't be masked is if you played the sound completely naked, without any other contexts. And then it's only on the very quiet bits, right? As it goes down to the sort of the floor. So, but that's not going to change like the sort of brightness or the perception of the sound in the way that you're describing. But it is something to consider.
+1.
Cool.
That's all I got to add.
No, it was perfect. Yeah, great description of a whole bunch of interrelated things that are pretty hard to convey because people are just like, why is that Unreal sound so bad? Unreal makes everything sound so bad.
Yeah. It doesn't. It's your
It
hearing
doesn't.
and your brain.
It's you.
That's
You're
what's,
the problem. That's what's happening.
It's you.
It's
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole center channel thing is an interesting choice, right? Because like if you're working on mono, but let's say you are working on a surround presentation, your mono is going to go to the center channel in your
where
DAW.
it belongs.
Well, it depends. I mean, maybe even not that, right? Like some people, that's a whole other debate, is what goes in the center channel, right? And so yeah.
I mean, I'm from film and television, so for the center channel is like pretty obvious what goes there, and yet people still argue about it because it's all a choice thing. So
I mean, even in film, they'll put effects or weird stuff on the center channel.
Yeah, everything's LCR, and it's like, oh, remember it was so simple before, but now with LCR, it's tricky again.
And games gonna do whatever they want. I mean, an indie game's gonna do whatever it wants, right? Yep. I think our default is to not. That's another setting, by the way, in your settings is to set whether you have center channel panning. And I think our default is to not pan to the center channel. But that suggests that you know in a again, it comes down to imaging. If you have a mono sound, should it image as if it's coming from the center when you listen to it, or should it image as if it's sort of double power? So I really blame the DAWs on false expectations here. I remember when I was teaching studio audio, there was like a secret rumor that was going around between the students. It was like what the teachers don't want you to know kind of rumor. And it was like, you can make your sound like louder by just doubling it. That was the trick. They were just going into Pro Tools and they were and I'd look at their sessions and it'd be like, like 3 identical it's the same sound just stacked on top of each other.
And you're like, yeah, you're right. That is something I didn't want you to do. Yeah. This has been fun.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So thank you, Eric, again for that 2-hour-long presentation. Thank you, David, for joining us, asking insightful questions and
thank you
being
both
humorous at the same time.
For keeping me on the rails.
Yeah, we don't let you get away with anything. If we left you to your own devices, it'd be mayhem.
Yeah, there'd be no sound in the game.
Most practical
one sound effect
ever had.
Like super optimized, single sound wave.
It's just it's just that Eric was kind of put on the watchdog, like as a sort of your like role became on the team as like someone who sort of looks for the.
It was self-inflicted, to be honest.
Someone's got to do it. You're doing, it's the reason it's on mobiles and every other platform ever. It's because of your work. So,
Yeah, it sucks being the fun police sometimes, but, we're all trying to make as good of an experience as possible on all platforms. And, even if things sound worse on a mobile phone or something, like at least it's not causing frame rate to drop or something like that.
Yeah.
So it improves the experience by making the sound worse in the best way possible.
Mobile players playing shooter game need all the help they can get, right? Like that's
You gotta have those 60
That's-
frames, you know,
yeah.
or 120. Whatever.
Only way they can be competitive.
Yeah, and there's tons of real competitive mobile against PC players.
Yeah, mostly Android users.
See an iPhone do that.
I just feel like those folks they just take it a little more seriously.
Cool.
All right, let's wrap.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. All the folks, Clara, Steven was here all the way to the end, and yeah,
Have a good
I
one.
don't know. Yes, yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Have a yeah. I'm really sort of out of sorts here.
You already forgot.
Bye.